Hello and welcome everybody to the International Testing Agency's webinar number 3. Today we'll be speaking about values, rights, and responsibilities. As people are still joining us, I am just going to go over a few things with you to give everyone a chance to log in and get comfortable. But first and foremost, I just want to make sure that everybody is safe, well, and healthy. We are dealing with a few crises at this time, and I am just very happy that we're all here united through sport, through our values, and regardless of where we're coming from, what our language is, what the color of our skin is. So given the difficult circumstances in this world, I thank you for being here today and for being united for this very important conversation. For those of you who are logging in for the first time, my name is Olya Abasolo. I am the Education Manager at the International Testing Agency. I'm a retired Olympian, and I will be moderating this discussion alongside Kady Kanouté Tounkara, who is here with us today. You can see her on the screen. Hi, Kady.
Hi.
Hi. So Kady and I share the complicated double names. This is the first thing we have in common. So let me just cover a few housekeeping items and then we'll get started. I can see people saying hello from different parts of the world, so thanks for logging in. Very important to note that we have a chat function that we'll be using today for our activities, and we also have a Q&A. So if you have any questions for our presenters today, or for me, for the athletes that will be joining us soon, please put them in the question and answer. If they go into the chat, there's simply too many messages rolling in, so we won't see it. And we will also have a few poll questions popping up for you throughout the session. So you will see those, you can answer them, or you can put them aside, completely up to you. Note that the session will be recorded and made available for viewing afterwards. So I know that's a question that always comes up, whether it's recorded or not. You will be able to see it on our website, and we will also share the slides with you. So if you have any questions about that, you can contact us in the chat or at education@ita.sport. So we do have a big audience, which means that we will likely not be able to cover all the questions today. So if you still need some answers, if you want to contact us later, this is the email address to use. We'll be able to get back to you. This is me monitoring this email address alongside a colleague. So we'll be sure to reply to your note. So today we are focusing on values, rights, and responsibilities, but do note that there will be 2 more webinars coming your way for the rest of the month of June. So we will speak about medications, supplements, therapeutic use exemptions, and about the prohibited list in about 2 weeks' time. And we will have a 5th session on the registered testing pool, whereabouts, atoms, and the new Athlete Central as well. All right, so I have a final note of housekeeping, courtesy of my legal team. There was a limited number of personal data collected during the registration process, which is your email address and your name. Of course, we will not be using these for any marketing purposes. We don't have any, so it's simply for the purpose of the registration for this webinar and to send you the recording, the presentation, and the registration link for the next session as well. Okay, so let's get into it. We have a very dynamic session, so there's going to be some interaction with you, our audience. We encourage you to participate by answering the questions through the chat, and if you're comfortable, of course, or you can answer the questions on your own and participate passively, so to say. I would encourage you, if you're able to attend from a laptop, because the slides will be better visible this way. And if you are attending on a mobile device, it may be a little bit difficult to see, but you can still participate in the discussion. So please, at this point, allow me to introduce my co-presenter officially. Kady Kanouté Tounkara is an Olympian who competed at the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, and she was the co-captain of the Mali basketball team. She was a professional player in Europe and was a 5-time French national junior champion before completing her marketing and management degree at the Fordham University in New York. Kady is a master trainer and steering committee member, and I'm reading all of this to make sure I get it right, of the International Olympic Committee's Career Plus program and the International Red Cross Career Development Program for persons with physical disabilities. She has facilitated workshops in over 50 countries and has recently been appointed as chair of the WADA Education Committee. In addition, Kady is also a member of the ITA Education Expert Group that works with our organization on the development of education programs. So Kady, welcome. Thanks again for being here with us today. And I'll let you say a few words to introduce our first topic and our first activity.
Well, thank you very much, Olya, and congratulations to you for organizing this very successful series of webinars. This is really going well. Thank you. So thanks to all of you for keeping up with us and with these technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience. So to be brief on the session, Olya was saying that I was very happy to co-facilitate this session with you. As we all know, the World Anti-Doping WADA was founded nearly 20 years ago by the International Olympic Committee and is the regulatory body and custodian for the World Anti-Doping Code. So the code is a set of anti-doping rules that works in conjunction with a set of international standards that apply for the over 600 sports organizations that are also called code signatories. So the new revised version of the code that we will refer to during this presentation today is available already on the WADA website and will come into force as of January 2021. Well, I think that both Olya and I are very excited about the fact that this new version of the code includes now a new standard of international about education, which is the new international standard for education. So what this means is that for all code signatories will be obliged and accountable for having at least an educational program within their organizations. So on the other end, the ITA, the sign that you see behind Olya there, International Testing Agency, is and must help international federation and major event organizers in complying with the World Anti-Doping Code. So meaning also to help them implementing their programs, being it for testing, but also soon for education. So in that sense, I'm very happy of the opportunity to work within this team of 5 international experts with the ITA to ensure that we provide to you as administrator and athletes the best programs that are available out there to support you. So now, even before the standard, the WADA code under Article 18 already outlined the mandatory element of education for its signatories. This involved going beyond providing information to you as stakeholders about rules and responsibility by going further and educating you about the concept of anti-doping. And to achieve that, the code strongly recommends that this education should be based on values, right? On a values-based learning approach for athletes and their support personnel. So it's this concept that we'll try to implement today during our session. And that's why we started with a very basic question, which is already, what is doping in sport? In your own words. And I've seen already in the chat some excellent questions, some excellent answers. So the answer, the definition of doping as per the code is as occurrence of one or more anti-doping rule violations set for Article 2.1 through Article 2.11. Okay, so what does that mean? I can tell you that honestly, when I was competing as an athlete, for me, doping just relies to 2 or 3 concepts. One was, of course, which is Article 1, the presence of prohibited substance in an athlete's sample, right? But as we can see, according to the new WADA code to come in force in 2021, there are 11 possible anti-doping rules violations, also called ADRVs. So I have a question for you on the chat. There used to be 10 possible anti-doping rule violation. Which one is the 11th one? And I'm waiting for your answers while I go a little bit through the 10s that we already know. So obviously, the obvious one and that we're familiar with will be, for example, the failure for athletes to file whereabouts information, right? Or to miss a test. Or it can be complicity or attempt complicity by an athlete or other person involved with anti-doping process, or prohibited association. So the 11th one, I see some very excellent answers here. Yes, is the act by an athlete or other person to discourage or retaliate against reporting to authority. So that's clearly with regard to whistleblowing. So we can see that the code has been adapting, and as I say, I will not go further into it, but you know that it's available on the WADA website already. So to pursue on our topic, I think that what is important to grasp about the concept of anti-doping is that it is a complex behavior when we look further into what anti-doping is. The second is that no one really knows why someone chooses to dope. And then the third is that doping is the result of multifactorial issues. And finally, there is no one way to prevent it. However, it is now better understood, especially through the outcomes of social science research. So as you all perhaps know, WADA has been investing massively over the last decade in anti-doping social science research, only to ensure that we come up with the best educational programs that are out there and that are grounded in scientific knowledge and evidence. So the video that we will play next is a result of some of those findings from social science research with regard to value-based education. So I believe our friend Spencer will now play a short video for you. It's a 4-minute video. But while you're watching the video, I want you to pay attention to two things. One is, what is the entourage of an athlete, right? So who is the entourage of an athlete? And what are vulnerability moments? So the video can play now. And while you're watching the video, feel free to answer some of those questions in the chat. Thank you.
People fall in love with sport because it's fun and they enjoy being active. They like to play sport with friends and improve their skills. There is a shared sense of fairness to competition, and sport helps to build character. But as athletes' commitments to sport grow, the demands of training and competition also grow, as does the pressure and desire to win, improve, and be the best. Over time, it is easy to lose sight of what is valued most about sport. As the win-at-all-costs attitude intensifies, defeat in competition becomes difficult to handle, and injuries and recovery periods can be challenging. There can also be increased pressure to win from people surrounding athletes. With all these pressures and influences, things can become increasingly hard, and the temptation to find a shortcut grows. Doping can appear as an option. At this point, athletes have a choice to make. In a supportive training environment that prioritizes athlete welfare and personal improvement, athletes are better equipped to handle moments of temptation. Receiving targeted messages at the right times also helps to protect athletes from doping. The vast majority of athletes respect the rules and compete clean. However, some athletes and support personnel believe doping to be prevalent and question the legitimacy of anti-doping. This can influence their behavior. Currently, the focus of anti-doping efforts is on testing for banned substances and investigating potential doping offenses, imposing penalties for anti-doping rule violations, providing information about anti-doping rules, as well as stressing that doping is cheating and against the spirit of sport. But we need to move beyond the current focus on testing and penalties and take a wider approach, because doping is a complex behavior. To prevent doping, we need a more diverse approach, reinforcing values to protect against doping and at the same time recognizing athletes' desire to continually improve in their performance. This involves ongoing targeted education, starting at a young age and involving athletes' wider support personnel. People who influence athletes need to be aware of moments of vulnerability to anticipate them and ensure they are providing the necessary support. These vulnerabilities include things such as injury and recovery, changing clubs or teams, advancing to a higher level of competition, and failing to achieve a major goal. So, where do we start? We need leaders in governments and sports organizations to commit to doping prevention. This involves financial investment and enhanced collaboration. Targeted education must become a priority. The sporting community has an obligation to enable positive experiences throughout athletes' careers. This makes doping prevention the responsibility of everyone involved in sport. Values must be a cornerstone of any prevention program. Values-based education programs must reflect the reality of sport and encourage athletes to achieve their goals within the rules. These programs present an opportunity to develop athletes and athlete support personnel who are confident to challenge any culture that tolerates or promotes doping. A well-rounded lifestyle can empower athletes to protect their right to clean sport.
I hope you're able to enjoy the video. So were you able to answer the questions? So what is the entourage of an athlete? And who is the entourage of an athlete? I'll try to go back to my slideshow so you can follow up with me. All right. All right, I'm waiting for your answers. So the first question is, who are the entourage of an athlete? And what are some of the vulnerability moments? Okay. All right, so you see, I hope you can visualize the slideshow. The athlete's entourage, as you can see on the graphic here, so you have the athletes in the center, and you have around the athletes all those different entities and personality that can more or less have an immediate impact on the athletes, right? So you can see organizers, sponsors, unions, coaches, employers, government, spectators, right? So the concept that we would like you to grasp here is that an athlete's world is far more complex than one may think, right? Everyone has a role to play on an individual growth and in development, and it's the case for athletes. And each individual athlete evolves within a definite circle of influence. So that's the key point here, meaning that that all those persons, different persons, can have an influence in the decision-making process for that athlete, right? So we have a saying in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child. Is something that can definitely relate to this concept of entourage when it comes to an athlete. So your question was, what are the key vulnerability moments, as you can see from the video? So I'm sure all of you have come up with the right answers, right? So you could have detected that changing clubs, training environment can be one of those moments. Entering a higher level of competition for an athlete, moving, for example, from a junior level to a higher level, right? You also have loss in competition, right? An unexpected loss can pressure the athlete, and he might wonder why he has lost and why not try to improve his performance in other ways when he has tried everything. So pressure to win, and pressure to win is really something that can also come from societal factors and from the environment, right? As some of the athletes are really making a living throughout their sport, it is really crucial that sometimes they win to just be able to make a living. So injuries are also critical moments in which an athlete can be inclined to dope. So those are the key vulnerability moments that an athlete can be inclined to dope. So I see some very good responses here. You're all right. So next, we have also seen the role that the entourage can play, right? We've seen that on one sense, the entourage can facilitate doping when it comes to, and so can influence an athlete in that sense. So how can the athletes, how can the entourage facilitate doping? I think that's an easy question. And those, you are probably familiar with all of those cases when you hear that athletes are complaining that they've been doped by their coaches or fellow athletes without them knowing, and sometimes it can even be family. So those are cases that are recurrent in the public media that we hear about entourage being able to facilitate doping. On the other end, we can see that entourage can prevent doping. So how can the entourage prevent doping? I think that's an easy one. So we have seen that the entourage is broad. We have, I think we can depict that there is a broader entourage, which can be sports organizations, and will now have the responsibility through education to already prevent doping. And that will be through having robust education programs with value-based approach for athletes and their support personnel. So that's what organizations can do. When it comes to the family, by educating themselves already. So the good news is that WADA has toolkits that are available for the entourage, as well as the code recommended strongly, not to only educate the athlete, but also their entourage. So there are toolkits for physicians, there are toolkits for parents, there are toolkits for organizations that are available out there, that so that through education already the entourage can prevent doping. Family, when it comes to young athletes, plays also a key role in preventing doping, because when a family member or a coach is able to detect, for example, those vulnerability moments in the life of an athlete, with the right message and the right talk, they can already prevent doping for that athlete. So that brings us a bit to our next topic, because part of what the entourage can do, especially the close entourage of an athlete, is also by having an impact on an athlete's self-esteem and having a support system where an athlete feels that sports is not the only thing that they can have in their life. So by developing life skill and having the right discussion with an athlete around who they really are, that's where we can include a values approach to preventing doping for that athlete. So in conclusions for this video, what we can say is that the right education, and obviously I think that we'll understand that it will be with the value-based learning approach at the right time. So ensuring that an athlete is educated, but since a very young age, but also all along his lifespan as an athlete, and also delivered by the right people, ensuring that this is done by people who are a certified educator in the field of anti-doping can help prevent doping. Another key finding in conclusion of this video is that value-based education is the most deterrent anti-doping education when it comes to athletes and support personnel. So now I was referring to building self-esteem and to better understand yourself, obviously for an athlete, with and will be how they will align with their values. But one of the Greek philosophers, Thales of Miletus, ancient Greek philosopher, said that the most difficult thing in life is to know yourself. So that's what we want to achieve, get athletes to better understand who they are, for them to make the right decision. But it's not always an easy exercise, and I think very soon we will experience it. However, the good thing about values is that when you know your values and when they're clear to you, making decisions become easier. So this is a quote from Roy E. Disney. You might all be familiar with the Disney Corporation. So Roy E. Disney was one of the co-founders of the Disney Corporation, and you can imagine along his life that he had to take some drastic decision as a top executive of such an impactful company. And so getting that quote from him is just to highlight that when you have hard decisions to make, for example, to dope or not to dope, when your values are clear to you, then making decisions becomes obviously easier. So let's experiment a little bit what values are, but before, let's try to define them, right? So we talk about values, and then we talk about traits. So your values and traits are part of your personality. When you connect with your personal value, you can chart a course that's right for you. You align your motivations with your actions, right? So when it comes to character traits are the behavior and attitude that can make up your personality. So you can think of traits as adjectives that will define you the most when you need to talk about yourself, right? I'm someone who's accurate. I'm someone who's gentle, etc. Okay. So at the same time, personal values are things that are important to us. They are characteristics and behaviors that motivate us and guide our decisions, right? So you feel better when you live according to your values, and you feel worse when you do not live according to your values. This applies in both day-to-day decisions and to larger life choices. So we have a small exercise with you for you here. It will be for you as an audience to define values that are more important to you as a person. So on my next slide, you will see a series of values listed. We had to make it short, but you can find a broader panel of values online. But those are the ones that we have selected for today. So can you select the 3 values that are the most important to you as of now? So you can see that they're diverse. It goes from excellence, and you have the definition under it, or power, faith, respect, determination, advancement, etc. So you have 1 minute to review those values and come up with 3 values that are important to you now.
Thank you, Kady. I hope that I am now well connected and that you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. It's such a celebration when technology works. But I will let everybody here choose their 3 values. If you want to note them for yourself and you don't want to share them with us, that's totally fine. If you want to put them in the chat, I see Mark already has chosen his values.
That's good.
You can do so. There is also a handout option where you can download this file, because I know that the words are quite small on the screen, so you may not be able to see them, but we'll give it a few more minutes. And I personally have chosen, and it may be affected by the recent events, but I've chosen freedom, equality, and love as my values, both as a person and as an athlete when I competed, potentially. Kady, I don't know if you have your 3 values as well.
Yes, I have my 3 values, but oh yeah, that's another comment I wanted to make, is that values are personal. So what is key to understand about values, that values are personal. So I see some very excellent one, but what I see in general is that values are positive. They are personal. You don't have to share them, but I see that you're sharing in the chat, and I think that this is just fantastic. One other thing about values is that values evolve with time, right? So if I had to go through this list 20 years ago, I would probably have very different values, right? And also values can be a result of our environmental or societal upbringing, right? Someone who's inclined with freedom and equality, it can be also a product of our environment. So your values are personal. You cannot be judged on them, but it's great to acknowledge them, because as we see, those are our guiding principles. Some of those values are universal, as we can see when it comes to organization as well, and that can explain why they're so successful. So when we look at Olympic values, for example, of friendship, respect, and excellence, right? And Paralympic values, determination, inspiration, courage, and equality, those are really values that are universal, and that makes us, like those events and support those events, because they can talk to all of us. So values are important, we can see, for organization as such. And I have a question. I see Mark is on the line. So what are the values of the ITA? Olya.
Oh my gosh, you quiz me on the spot. I probably have to go on our website and check, but they definitely overlap. We have the excellence as one of them.
It's excellence, quality, and which one is the last one?
You promised you would not test me on the webinar, and you did. I knew you would do that to me. I'm literally Googling it on the side here to make sure that I don't give the right answer, the wrong answer. Integrity.
It's great. It's great to know the
integrity.
values. Okay, so excellent, equality, integrity. So that's very important, and that's why we feel a connection with a given organization, because we also value. All right. So
thank you, Kady.
So,
Oh, yes, you have
you're
the traits.
welcome.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So,
I cut you off there.
assessing personal traits. Yes. So we spoke about values, but also we spoke about personal traits, and it's great that we will hear soon from some athletes. But athletes are unique persons, and what we can say about traits is that they can achieve what they're doing not only for physical, because of their physical ability, but also because they have unique and specific traits. So one of them is keeping optimistic mindset, staying focused, being in control, feeling that you belong, having a strong support network. So those are traits that really makes us athletes and sports people very unique, and that can also guide in our decision-making process. So in conclusion, what we can depict from this session is that majority, and what we should know is that majority of athletes, because of the traits you have seen before, do not dope, but many can be vulnerable. And that's the key point, that 100% of athletes do not dope, or do not want to dope, but many can be vulnerable at critical moments, right? Making decisions to that more about yourself, right? Use those values in all the decisions, big or small, would definitely help you. Also, apply values to your career and to your sport as an athlete. Athlete support personnel and administrators is also key. So that's my section for now. I think Olya, you'll take over. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kady, so much for this session. And I can see a big participation from the audience. It may seem like an elementary exercise to choose some keywords, but if you really put your faith in it, it can be almost a guiding exercise in whatever role you may be taking on. If you're an athlete, if you're working with athletes, if you're a coach or part of the entourage that we've discussed, it is certainly worth doing that exercise with the people around you. To give you a little bit of direction in life when you need to make those big or small decisions. So you will notice now on the screen that we have guests joining us. First, I have Sharad on the line. Hi, Sharad. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us. Before I introduce you, I just want to see, did you choose your top 3 values from that list?
Actually, I did check in all of the above, so it was all of them actually.
All the values.
I like to...
Excellent. Well, there's a lot to choose from, and there's no right or wrong answer there. But Sharad, thank you very much for joining me. I just want to say before I really introduce you that we have 2 stories that are very important to share today. So I hope Søren can join us a little bit later. I know he's actually on the train, so his connection is probably not great either. But they're both stories of a positive doping case. So in Sharad's case, it was an inadvertent case, and Søren has admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs. So there is that commonality, but at the same time, they're very different stories. And so I want to remind everybody that the purpose of this webinar is for education. It's to learn, it's to share, it's to tell stories, and to make a change through initiatives like this one. So we ask you, and I don't think I need to ask you, I'm sure that you will be respectful and constructive in your discussion. We encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A for the athletes. We have some time to go over those today. And Sharad, I will start with you while we wait for Søren to join us. But you said you will choose you will choose all the values on that list. But if you had a top 3, maybe what are some of these values? What are some of these reasons that you've decided to join the webinar and to talk about your story?
The reason I want to be on the webinar was because the thing that I've been going through, I needed a platform to actually tell things what few athletes like us who have been maybe framed but have been given sanction even though we could not prove ourselves innocent. And in that we've been going the thing, it doesn't end with us right when the sanction is over or when we handed over the sanction. It's like a lifetime thing for me particularly, because I've been going through this for that every day I think about it each day, and especially like when I knew for a fact that I didn't do something and I was punished for it, and yet I couldn't prove myself that I was innocent. So that is one part that it's been always there with me, and it's also changed me as a person after all. Like, because that's when I realized that a lot of times we might not do something which we intend to do or somebody has actually framed us into, but then we'll have to just accept it because that's what the law has just verdicted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the right time to really give a context to your answer, because Sharad, you are still an active athlete, and you represented India in high jump at the Paralympic Games in 2016, and you are still training for Tokyo. However, you were also on the road to compete at the 2012 Paralympic Games, and that road was cut short by a sanction. So you tested positive for a performance-enhancing substance, and that is a decision that you had to defend in front of a panel without a lawyer, by yourself. But it ended up with a 2-year ban. So it's still something that, like you said, it's still following you. It's still kind of fresh and very sensitive. So I mean, all the more thanks from us to you for talking about this today. I'm just gonna take the questions here for Søren to a later point in our discussion, but let me at this point transition over to the part that we had started initially when we were waiting for Kady to log back in, and Sharad, I will pick it up with a few more questions in just a second.
Hello.
But let's. Oh, we have Søren on the line.
This is
a back and forth on technology today. Don't worry.
Everything.
Were you able to participate in the values exercise with us? Did you choose your top 3 values?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I did. My values.
Do you want to share them with us?
Yes, sure. So my compassion, or my values are integrity, compassion, and loyalty. That's my
Søren, I will introduce you at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the integrity one is a strong choice for today's discussion. Absolutely. But let me introduce you as well. Some people may not be familiar with your story. Søren is a former Danish decathlete. So he was the athletics pentathlon and decathlon champion 5 times from 1989 to 1995 in Denmark. And Søren is also the first person in Denmark to be banned for life from sport, from competing. And that is due to the use of anabolic steroids on 2 separate occasions. And so this ban ended Søren's athletic career. And at this point in 2011, maybe 15 years after what happened with a lifetime ban, you have filed a request to be able to coach. So you're now working with junior athletes in track and field and at football.
Yeah.
And you are currently, and you're also mentoring athletes as well, high performance athletes.
Yes,
but
I am.
You're also waiting for a decision on whether or not you would be able to coach senior athletes. So, the reason I ask you about the values as well is perhaps now you're going through your second life in sport, because your first life was cut short by this decision to dope. Now, how are you following these values now when you're working with the next generation of athletes?
Oh, this is all about core baseline for me, working with young kids, young athletes these days, and certainly giving back to the sport is a big thing for me. But the integrity is very important. I try to teach the juniors this, every single day. The compassion for the sports of track and field, and also, of course, the loyalty. For the loyalty is definitely for the coach, but also for respect for the sport, respect for the environment, and respect for the core values of our sport. And it's on a regular basis, on a daily basis, those core values are come to shown with my team. I'm so lucky. I have a team of 28 young kids from the age of 13 to 19. And it's just amazing to be back in the sport like this. If you 25 years ago, what was my core values back in the days? I would say whatever it takes, no means. Definitely also compassion was a huge thing for me back in the days. And going through this presentation, from a very nice presentation, Kady, I really love what you showed here, because I would love to have those information back in my time. Also, what are the flaws? How can you get involved or not involved in taking a bad decision? I was 18 years old back at the time, and had an injury, very serious injury. I broke a pole and hurt my back very terribly, and was told from doctors, not from my coach, that it's going to take years before I'm going to be able to be back in the sport. And when you're 18 years old and your whole life is based for me, being told that you're not going to be able to compete in the next couple of years, athletes training out in our club who told me about those things, that you can eat a tablet and then you get back to shape faster and easier. And we didn't have those kind of information. We didn't was informed on the level that we are today. We are not warned. My days was the year after Ben Johansson, actually, when it all started. And of course we heard and saw. I think what's more important is that also young people make a bad decision. Can you hear me?
Søren, I'm not sure if the connection is. I may be the only one facing still a little bit of a challenge.
Can you hear me?
Maybe I can get a thumbs up from Sharad and Kady to see how they're hearing the answer. Oh, I'm the only one. Great. Well, I'm so sorry, Søren, to cut you off short. I will let you finish your answer, and then we can continue. I apologize for my intrusion. All right. I think we're all good. I will continue at this point. We continue to have a little bit of a technical challenge, so I unfortunately, as much as I would have loved to hear the full answer from Søren, I did have a few calls with him to listen to his story, so I know some of the things that he was saying, and I can see here we're getting no audio. So give me maybe I will see in the chat if you can hear me. I know that we lost Søren there, but I think we're okay. So at this point, I'm just going to give it 1 second to make sure you can hear me. It seems like everything is under control. Yes, excellent. Okay, so these were the introductions for us to brief stories of Sharad and Søren, but we will talk to these two individuals and ask more questions. So this is certainly not the end, but I wanted to make sure that we integrate these questions into our discussion. So more questions to come as it relates to the Athletes Anti-Doping Act. And I will reintroduce this topic one more time from the very start. So I will note that here that even though these are athlete rights, all the stakeholders of the anti-doping system have a responsibility to know, understand, and promote these. And from the brief, I know that I had poor connection with Søren, but he had mentioned that if he knew this as a young athlete, then perhaps he would have acted differently. But here I just want to say one thing before we go into the details of the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act. And it's the principle of strict liability. So that means that each athlete is strictly liable for the substances found in their body.
I'm back again, Olya.
The anti-doping rule violation occurs. Hi,
Sorry.
Søren, welcome back. We'll come back to you in a
Sure.
second, but I apologize for cutting you off earlier there.
Okay.
So this means that whether or not an athlete intended to dope, whether or not an athlete intentionally or unintentionally used a prohibited substance, they are liable. So if we look at different laws and rules applied to different stakeholders of the anti-doping system, the athletes are by far held to the strictest standards in the system. And of course, there's a reason for that. But Sharad, here, I want to ask you a question on strict liability, because I recently read an article that says that with, it's for Sharad. I know that Søren and Sharad, we're going to go back and forth here. But I recently read an article that said that the morally innocent may suffer, so the guilty do not escape. And that was the way to talk about the principle of strict liability. So in other words, there are many athletes who do not intend to dope, but are facing the same consequences as those who did. So, Sharad, do you feel like, does that quote, it's a strong one and it's a challenging one, does that resonate with you at all?
In certain ways, like I just feel that even there's a law which there's a quote in law which says that let 99 guilty go away, but one innocent shouldn't be punished for something which is not done. So it's something like that I believe in, that if one innocent is being punished for anything like which he's not done, so I think that needs to be changed, because I see the thing what I'm going through particularly in my life, like it's something I wouldn't want somebody to go through this, especially the traumas which I'm having even after this. Like I realize that something which I haven't done and I'm being punished for. So I think there has to be a change here too, that
Absolutely.
That an innocent person shouldn't be prosecuted.
And you know, when I asked that question and I was preparing for this presentation, I said I knew this is going to be a sensitive question, because we can look at the principle of strict liability for a long time and argue against and for, and to talk about the fact that athletes are indeed put to the strictest of the laws in the anti-doping system compared to some of the other stakeholders. So I was curious when I saw that quote. I really thought of you and to have your opinion. It's an interesting discussion, but I think for the purpose of today's conversation, we don't want to look at the system, but rather we want to see how we can constructively learn together and to take away for our respective roles. So having discussed the principle of strict liability, I want to come back to the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act that I just introduced a few minutes ago. And so let me just make sure I have my notes for you so I don't miss any parts of it. But this is a new act. So this is a recently approved document that was part of the new code and standards. So it will come into effect in 2021. So the document is available on the WADA website. But if you want to access and review it now, you can see it in the handout section, so you can download it right away. So we've made it available for you. Note that many athlete rights existed before and were kind of spread around the code and the standards, but now they're all just concentrated in one place. So this is really the leadership of the WADA Athlete Committee under Ben Sanford, who took this initiative to make sure that athletes know their rights and they can access them. So this is essentially a reference act that refers to different legal pieces, such as the code and the standards. So let's take a look at these. I will cover them all very briefly, but once again, this is a document created by WADA, and they've had a wonderful webinar on it, which is available, I believe, on their website. And there's so many resources, so I encourage you to get more informed if you still have more questions. So there are 14 points in this Anti-Doping Rights Act. The last two, we can call them housekeeping, but really the first 12 are really, really important for us to review. And there are also suggested athlete rights that are in the second part of the Athletes' Right Act. So we're just looking at part number 1 at the moment. So the first one is equality of opportunity. So athletes, and I'm reading this to make sure I get it right, athletes have the right to equal opportunity in their pursuit of sport to perform at the highest level in both training and competition. In other words, clean athletes have the right to compete clean against other clean athletes. The second right in this act is equitable and fair testing programs. So that means that no matter where and when an athlete is tested, that should be done in compliance with the code and international standards. And I know, Sharad, from reading your case, you've even mentioned that you were once notified a day before a test. So part of your, when you went to bring this case, positive test case to the panel, you said, I was notified the day before, which shouldn't even happen. So we can still see a lot of discrepancies in how testing is run. The third right that we have is medical treatment and protection of health rights. So it's twofold, this one. The athletes have the right to be free from any pressure that jeopardizes their health through doping. So that is mental and physical health. And the second is the athletes have a right to therapeutic use exemption, which we actually have a separate session on medications, prohibited list, supplements, and therapeutic use exemptions. So we can talk a little bit about that in more details. Number 4 is the right to justice. So this is the right to a fair hearing with a fair and independent hearing panel and a timely decision. On appeal, athlete has the right to be represented by counsel, although at their own expense. And I will come back to you, Sharad, with this question. In your case, you did not have the funds to have legal aid, so you pursued the case yourself. However, the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act in Part 2 has a recommended athlete rights, as I had mentioned, and recommendation number 17 is the right to legal aid. Now, it states that athletes should have the right to access legal aid for hearings and appeal process in doping cases. How important is it, do you think, Sharad, for athletes and anti-doping organizations to advocate for this right and to make it legal and to make legal aid more accessible for those who need it?
In 2012, when I first went to NADA, means National Anti-Doping Agency, I saw a team of lawyers, but that was for the agency, and nobody was there for me. And the thing is, I was a college student then, and nobody was funding me or financing me that time to do my sports activities. So when I tried to consult a lawyer, that person asked me a tremendous amount of money, and I couldn't afford that. And I think that's where I was first broken, because there was nobody to fight for me. There was nobody to stand for me or even put up my file. So I prepared this along with my brother and a few friends of mine. And for that, we had to read through the whole book, the code book. We read through it. We framed our own draft, and then we went on to it. So I think for now, I think every athlete, whoever goes through such a thing, first thing they should have is a legal advisor. And if they can't afford it, or they should be provided yet. This is one thing that has to be done, because it's not that, see, athletes are people who perform on the arena sports and everything. But if they are asked to put up a draft for themselves in an appeal or something, I think it's going to be really difficult. I was lucky that I had a brother who was well educated with the language out there, so he could help me in that. But yet, now when I read that same draft today in 2020, I see that it is all weird that I had wrote that, because it's not what I really meant to say out there.
You did the best you could, given the resources that you had. And I see a lot of comments on the chat here, back and forth, what the rights are, what they should be, who is right and who is wrong. And, that's part of the discussion. I know that we are speaking about very sensitive information here. And regardless of what the audience thinks is right and wrong, we all have kind of different opinions, and that's totally normal. So, I just find it interesting to see that parallel discussion going on as we talk about athletes' rights, and as Sharad gives his personal experience, and as Søren speaks about his experience as well. But yeah, absolutely, this is I find it very interesting to see the navigation that the athletes have to go through, or the path that they have to go through in case of an adverse analytical finding. So those of you who are members of athletes commissions and have roles that can influence athletes' rights within different organizations, I encourage you to, 1, apply Part 1 of the Act, and 2, to consider Part 2 of the Act, which features some of the suggested athletes' rights, like the right to legal aid. So let's move on to data protection, which is point 8 of the Act. So a lot of sensitive data is, of course, collected. So this right refers to specifically to the athlete's right to privacy and protection of personal information. So that includes any medical data or any data about the tests collected. Right to compensation is our point 9. So athletes have the right to pursue damages from another athlete or person whose actions damaged that athlete by commission of an anti-doping rule violation. So it's important here to note that previously the prize money has been redistributed to anti-doping organizations, and now athletes have the right to claim those funds. So this is a big change and a big important update. Let's look at number 10, so protected persons' rights. This refers mainly to the minors in the code, but a full definition is available in the appendix of the 2021 code. So those persons who are minors shall have further protection because of their age or lack of a legal capacity. Point 11 here, those are our rights during sample collection, and it's something that we discussed at the last webinar, so I encourage you to log on to ita.sport if you want to look at the doping control process webinar, but here they are just as a reminder. It's important that athletes know their rights during sample collection and know their responsibility as well. So I won't go over these, but I'll just pop them up on the screen. And finally, right to B-sample analysis. So in case of an adverse analytical finding, an athlete can request to have their sample analyzed. And that is something that Sharad did with his case, and he did have his B sample analyzed. Okay, so the number 13 and 14 are, as I said, kind of logistics, more or less, and I don't have the right legal language to say it, but they basically mean that the other rights and freedoms are not affected. And the point 14 is application and standing. Let's look at the athlete rights responsibilities at this point, because these are equally important to understand. And once again, those of you who are not athletes, who are administrators, it is your responsibility then to make sure that your athletes are well educated and understand these responsibilities. So every right has the right to education, to be informed, and it is their responsibility to know and follow the rules. It is the athlete's responsibility to be available for sample collection. So that is when being notified in competition, but if you're a registered testing pool athlete, or if there's a test conducted by UNATO, that can be out of competition as well. You have a full responsibility for what you ingest, so what appears in your sample, and that is the principle of strict liability here. And you have full responsibility to inform the medical personnel of your obligations as an athlete. Finally, you have to cooperate with anti-doping organizations and your sport federation, and especially those federations or the anti-doping organization that has jurisdiction for you, over you as an athlete. Okay, so we are quickly, I can see here, we're quickly running out of time, so I do want to turn my focus to, I'll remove this presentation here, and I will shift my focus to the athletes once again. So I think everybody's online and everybody's camera is working and the microphones are working, so that's great. Let's do a little bit of a Q&A, and then we will see what questions we have from the audience as well. Now, I'll ask you, Sharad, again, another question, but you were successful at a very young age, so you were 19 years old, and you were #1 in the world at the time when you received the news of your sanction. Did you quite realize how large or how complicated the system was and what your rights and responsibilities were at that point in time?
No, actually, in 2012, I just was in college and I was like a normal student who was enjoying sports as well as his education. And in this, I didn't even realize that we had to be so strict and so attentive. I was doing what I loved the most, and that was athletics. And in due course, I really never thought that I would come through such a situation. And now when I look at it till 2020, now I feel that yes, there was a lot of things that I should have done there as an athlete. I should have been knowing everything by then too, because it's not as easy as what we think, and it's not safe like that either. So in that manner, we have to be very attentive, and that has to be addressed at a very early age to any athletes coming at a young age. Maybe even in school, they should be told their rights, which I wasn't. And I wasn't even informed like how serious it could be. I was just basically enjoying my game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned, and there's a lot of discussion in the chat as well, that it should start early, education start early. And Søren, you are currently on your way to a coaching session. Is that correct? You're on the train.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. So you are on your way to coach athletes, and funny enough, the time when athletes are most influenced in their career is their junior years, and you are allowed at the moment to coach only junior athletes. So listening to this presentation now, not as an athlete, but as a coach, what do you take of all of this? And is this something that is a message that you're going to be passing on to the youth and the kids that you're working with?
Certainly. Currently we are still under this corona situation also in Denmark. But, we have 4 times a year, I'm planning where we do some sessions aside from training. And this is definitely going to be implemented and also shown, because as you and I talked about earlier, that, the whole situation about me getting back to the sport. First time I got a lifetime ban, which you don't have in a civil court, and you certainly don't have it in a sports court either. But now I'm finding my way back. But I was allowed to influence on juniors, not on seniors. And it's for me, it makes more sense that you have people like me that have a full integrity, who wants to give back, who have bitten their sins. I'm 48 years old. This is 25 years ago. I learned my lesson. It had a huge impact on my life for 25 years now, more than anyone could imagine. Even my son, who's 17 years old today, he's doing track and field, which I'm happy about. But the rumors about me is sticking to my son. So it still have a huge impact, my decision back in the days. So now, when I start working again with track and field and also with football, this has been a big part of my way of coaching, to give them integrity, to give them information, but certainly also to make them understand that they can raise the bar by themselves mentally. You don't need things around you. I don't like these protein stuff you can buy everywhere. There's a huge problem with that as well. For me, it's about the will, the willingness to make an effort, and to have a coach who supports you. Mm-hmm. So yes, the things I heard today, especially from you, Kady, amazing presentation. I really enjoyed this, and this is going to be implemented in our club.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And you mentioned, now being a father to a 17-year-old. Kady, you also have a son who is playing basketball, right? Is he playing basketball now as well? Even though you didn't want him, you tried him to play tennis. But I have a 3-year-old daughter, and you get a whole different perspective on the impact of your decisions. Being young, you think of your career and your sport, and that's really what I did for many years as well. But Kady, I'm sure you can relate as well to hearing that, saying my son is still feeling the impact of my decision.
Definitely, I think it's crucial that very early this topic is introduced to young athletes, and also that go back to Sharad comments on what he would have loved to learn early on in his career. I think in that sense, WADA has been collaborating with UNESCO also to ensure that the concept of doping, which can be introduced in different ways for a younger audience. So we will perhaps address them through fairness and equality and so on, with other terms and other ways to start the conversation. But it is really crucial. It's really crucial that anti-doping education starts at a very early age, but also that the WADA guidelines when it comes to education has a framework to tell organizations as to how athletes can be educated depending on the stages of their career. And I think that's very important to implement for any sports organization, and some are doing a very good job at it. The goal is really to get a harmonized concept and a harmonized approach for all sports organizations to be able to implement that. And that was really the goal of the international standard and the guidelines that are available out there.
Absolutely,
yeah,
Kady.
but cannot agree with you more. Can I jump in?
Sure.
As you know, as Sharad was saying, and also you, Kady, when we were doing our sports, we were doing this for fun. We do it for this was, life, the way of not having a computer like these. But that for me, when I got tested positive, everyone turned their back on me, even coach clubs, federations, everyone. And no there to say, okay, Søren, you're a young kid, 18 years old, you can get back, but you need to get some integrity. You need to understand that the decision you make is going to have an impact. And if we don't show this and educate, young people, kids, teenagers about this to test in the system, we still see too many people trying to find the easy way around the corners. And we can't just turn the back on a positive test, even if it's for you, Sharad, in your special situation, or Kady, or for my situation. We need to educate, and also the federation needs to understand, and also you guys, Olya, from ITA, you need to educate also the federations and ADD that if you have a positive test, it's your responsibility to make sure they don't get out on an even worse path they already started.
Absolutely.
And this is a part of my integrity.
And it's interesting because we do speak about
hanging.
Yeah, absolutely. We speak about strict liability a lot. We speak about sanctions and catching the cheats. That's the phrase you hear quite a bit. But then, when an athlete does test positive, it's kind of off the radar. I know, Sharad, you were also asked to leave the training grounds immediately so that, what is that, a month before games? It's just such a traumatic experience. I'm sure for you it was.
It just made me into a man from a boy, actually. Just one day. It was like all I get to read it from the newspaper that I've been tested positive, and then I've just given a flight ticket that you go and fight your own case. And that's how it is. Nobody was there to tell me what to do next. I am running from post to pillars, and I'm just trying to find out what should I do. How am I supposed to be like good for the competition, which is in 1 month time? I've been number one for the whole year. The thing is, like, what I was jumping in 2012 is something which I was jumping in 2008 when I was in school in Darjeeling. It was the same thing I was jumping, and yet nobody figured that out. That a person who's in school, he's jumping the same height in 2012. Also, he's doing the same height. And there is a chance that he could have been sabotaged. But yes, it is like, it's found in your body. This is you. That is it. You got to take the sanction. But you have to give the age also maybe some relaxation that, this person is an 18-year-old or 19-year-old. Maybe he didn't know about it. Something like that. But no, it was just branded. Like, this person has done it, and that's it.
And I think there's one thing that is in common for all of us. Kady, you have not had any education when you were tested for the first time. I was 14 young when I was tested for the first time. No education. Sharad as well, your first test, you've mentioned that when you were actually tested, then you said, okay, I need to learn about what this is, how I eat, what medications I take. And I will make the assumption that, Søren, you did not have much information either when you were tested for the first time. No. Okay, I can hear the no right away.
Yeah, but I think for Sharad, and probably also for Kady, I was left alone to go to the and I was 18 years old. No one taught me about how a test would go, and if you got caught, what would happen. And an 18-year-old boy, seriously, I was just a boy sitting in front of ATD, which is anti-doping Denmark, and try to explain, guys, yes, I admit what I did. I have no problem I'm a grown-up to take that kind of decision. But sitting in front of a big panel of lawyers, try to understand what they were talking about. 25 years later, now it's still dragging me behind me. I forgot it. I'm past it, way past it. But I didn't want to be in the shoes of Sharad, having to read a full book, and unfortunately, he had a good brother who can help him out. But I think that you guys, ITA, Anti-Doping Denmark, IOC, need to take some responsibility, like you, us, and people globally. But we need to reach out more, and we need to support, even though they are cheaters or I'm a cheat. We need to support the cheaters as well. I'm sorry to say so. It's a social responsibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I cannot agree more. And at this point, I think the conversation naturally goes to education. I think every time we try to talk about the personal story, everything comes back to information, and everything comes back to education. And I can see a lot of messages of support from the chat as well to both of you for sharing your stories. So I really am happy to see this feedback. I will, on the topic of education, take a question from Paolo, who I think this is the one that I can answer, but please, Sharad, Søren, Kady, especially Kady, you've done so much work with WADA on the Education Committee. Maybe even, I'm changing my mind here, maybe you can answer this question, but being education, one of the key prevention strategies already pointed out in the World Anti-Doping Code, how do you envision to implement this? There are many online courses from different federations and organizations who should be the main targets for you. So maybe we can answer that from both ITA perspective and from WADA. Youngster, junior, elite athlete, support personnel, what is the added value provided by education?
So thank you for your question, Paolo. And so WADA comes in as a regulatory body and responsible for drafting the code, but ultimately what WADA strives to do from the education department perspective is to ensure that they provide guidance as to stakeholders how to run their proper education programs, but also has, as we mentioned before, a lot of tools, as you mentioned, that are available already for ADOs to implement and to customize for their own needs. So the goal is not for WADA to come and implement a program for you per se, but rather for you to ensure that you have a program that is customized to the need of your athletes and support personnel, and that you have evidence-based materials that are out there that you can use. So that's why there's different programs and material that are available out there, but it's really for the organization itself to be able to implement it. So some are doing very well, some are doing a fantastic work, but at the same time, for a small organization, we can see that this can be a challenge. And this, well, that's where a third party such as the ITA can come in, and I'm sure Olya can pursue on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the ITA perspective, we're almost, our main goal is to service our partners. So we have international federations, we have major event organizers. So the International Olympic Committee, for example, we are doing work on the way to Tokyo. But our goal is to service these stakeholders. So we do run the programs, we do in-competition testing, out-of-competition testing, we have sample storage, other things, legal work, analysis, risk assessment. But then education ties into that. So education is part of a larger anti-doping program, and this is where we fit in. So our goal is to help the federations with their audiences, so their athlete support personnel, athlete entourage, their administrators, and one of these projects is this webinar to do this education initiative. But these are already high performance athletes. So when we look at the larger sports system, yes, we are talking a lot about youth. We're talking about a new standard of education that says that athletes should be educated before they're tested for the first time. So that responsibility falls onto the club level, where somebody like Søren, who is a coach, will have a responsibility to speak to his athletes and educate them. That falls into a responsibility of national anti-doping organizations. So somebody like Sharad will understand the system that he's in at 18, 19 years old. So these are all different ways that each stakeholder has a role to play in the system. I know that we only have 2 minutes left, so I am going to take a question from Eric here. And you know what? Maybe I'll ask you, Søren. To what extent is the financial factor, such as prize money, responsible for the use of doping? Did you have any financial motivation behind your decision at the time?
No. Well, I had a sponsor. I had a bank. No, well, I had clothes from Adidas, and I also have a local sponsor giving me some money a year. But now we're talking back in the year 90, so it was not the kind of amount that we are talking about today. I had about 2,000 euros of clothes every year, and I had about 1,500 euros for training camps from a local bank. That's it.
And I'm sure it's very different for each country and for each situation, because I know that Sharad, you've mentioned that there was a motivation for your fellow athletes to be on the Paralympic team because there's that government support. So it's a bit of a different experience for you, isn't it?
There are few states, like in our country there are 30 states. So in that, there are few states which give a lot of amount of money just for mere participation, and those amounts are not even given by few states, even when you win that amount. So it is such a case out there, and especially when I told you about the quota system in Paralympics, where there are about 50 athletes and only 5 have to go, and all of them are in a race. It's like, while people just going there to fight and just do anything out there to take anybody down.
I know what you mean, Sharad.
And I was a victim of that time, and nobody realized that, and nobody even came to my head to support.
Absolutely. So it's a different perspective when we look at different countries and different ways of functioning. We are now quickly an hour and a half into this session, so I will wrap it up here. If you can give me one quick answer to this question, because I think it's a good one, and a guest is asking us, I want to know the toughest decision you made in your sports career. So quickly, Sharad and then Søren, and we wrap it up.
For me, the toughest decision is to carry on sports, even though I know that I will be still charged a cheater, even though I'm not. That is the toughest decision which I'm doing that.
Mine is entering back to the sport. That's been the toughest decision I made in my sports career. Trying to get back as a coach. That's not easy.
Oh, absolutely. It was easy to choose that moment, though. You knew right away how to answer that question. And I think even for myself and for Kady, and I hope that for the rest of the audience, you found value in this. I certainly did. I thank you once again, Kady, for moderating an excellent session and for giving us this interactive exercise. I want to thank the technology gods for letting us be online and working everything out. But most importantly, a big thank you to Sharad and to Søren for being so vulnerable and honest with us, and for sharing your stories. It's not easy, but it's an important conversation. So thank you both so much for taking that time. I really appreciate it. This wraps up our session on values, rights, and responsibilities. We will still be online 2 more times in June, so June 16th, I believe, and June 30th for 2 more webinars. And if you still have any questions for us, you can contact us at education@ita.sport, so you can see it online here. And we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website. And you can also see the registration link for the next webinar on our social media. So at this point, I want to ask everyone to please stay safe, stay healthy. And thank you once again to everyone for actively participating in the session. So bye for now, and we'll connect again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.